Wonderful. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Angela Charles, Director of Charlotte Water, and welcome to the Charlotte Water Interbasin Transfer Modification Request Public Meeting. We are here to listen to the public comments regarding our interbasin transfer modification request. This is part of the process. Before I go any further, let me make sure we don't have any elected officials. Do we have any elected officials here? Okay, I would also like to go to our regulatory partners. And so, beginning with you, Harold, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us what you're from.
I'm Harold Brady. I work in the Department of Environmental Quality, the Division of Water Resources, water supply planning. I manage the water supply development program, where I assist water systems across the state with their water supply needs.
And good evening, Ron Hargrove, one of the deputy directors of Charlotte Water. And I'm here to share a little bit of information about Charlotte Water.
Thank you. Also, if you work for Charlotte Water, will you please just raise your hand? We got a host of folks who are here and supporting us in this effort. I also want to mention Brown and Caldwell and Chernoff Newman as partners in this process. And I don't want to proceed any further without thanking the city of Albemarle for helping us secure a location and providing support to us with this process. So thank you to the city of Albemarle and particularly their public utilities director, Jay, who is here with us. So what is this meeting about? Now, when water is moved from one river basin to another river basin, it is called an interbasin transfer. And there are many of them in the state of North Carolina. And so that's what this meeting is about. Charlotte Water is going through a process to modify the interbasin transfer certificate that we have. We are not asking for permission to withdraw more water from the Catawba River. So it is very important that everyone listening and participating in here today understand that we're not asking for permission to withdraw more. This is more about the transfer of water from one river basin to the other. And Ron will talk more about our specific thoughts and requests in the presentation. So let's look here at the agenda. Introductions, we've done it. Harold's going to come up and do an IBT program overview. Then Ron Hargrove will do a presentation on a modification request. And then I'll come back up and we'll do questions. Are there any questions so far? Okay, Harold.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Again, I'm Harold Brady in the Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Water Resources. I'm going to try and just give a brief overview of what an interbasin transfer is. This is the same presentation. I use this presentation quite often. This is the same presentation I give to EMC members to bring them up to speed on really what do we mean by interbasin transfers and what the process is. So I'm going to go through, start off at the top with just a definition, get into the statutes, talk about the process, and then importantly, what are the decision considerations that the EMC must take up through this process. Right, very, very high level here. When we're talking about an interbasin transfer, we're talking about the movement of surface water. It has nothing to do with groundwater. This is all about surface water. And it's about moving, the concept of moving waters from one river basin to another ditch river basin to a discharge. And it is the purpose of the IBT law to ensure it is good public policy to do these types of transfer activities. That's what the whole interbasin transfer process I'm going to talk about really is thinking about. So, who needs to get an interbasin transfer certificate? Right now in the state, we have 9 certificates. They are all water systems, but it's really in any entity that transfers water from one basin to the other, at certain thresholds. So it's really that 2 MGD threshold, million gallons per day threshold, is what catches a lot of the water systems in the state, to need a certificate. I said a lot, like I said, there's only 9 certificates that have been issued, so not a whole lot hit that 2 MGD threshold. The other 2 thing, number 2 and number 3, they just don't really come up that often. 2 was more about during the time when it was originally issued in 1993. And then 3 also gets into actions that have happened during when the statute was initially prepared in 93. Charlotte Water already has an IBT certificate of 33 billion gallons per day from the Catawba to the Rocky. So now I've sort of gotten that the statute out of the way. And what really is an interbasin transfer? Let's give a couple of quick examples. So it's the transfer equals the withdrawal minus the return. So we're talking about the net and not the gross amount of water that's moved across basin boundaries. So looking at the first example, the one at the top. Here, all right. You've got the source basin over here. You've got a river running through. They're withdrawing 10 million gallons a day in this example. We're moving into the service area, just this oval here. The town service area is built on the ridge line, like most of the towns across the state. 2 MGD of that initial 10 is used what we refer to as consumptively. That means the water was used to either wash a car, water a lawn, maybe a septic, but it went into the ground. It wasn't collected in their wastewater collection system. Also in that service area, in the receiving basin, on the other side of where that source, where the river where you're withdrawing the water from, the other side of that divide is called the receiving basin. And the service area within that uses 3 million gallons a day. The same way on the ground. They also, with their wastewater collection system, collect 5 billion gallons a day, and they discharge that through a wastewater treatment plant to a receiving basin, river, or stream. This example, even though the withdrawal was 10, total interbasin transfer is 8, 5, and 3. This is pretty common, what we see in North Carolina, where towns are built up on the ridgeline. The second example here, it's a little bit less common, but we certainly see it. Where you have a town, it's the same situation with drawing 10, discharging 5, but the town service area is entirely within the receiving basin. So that 5 that they're using within the receiving basin, within their service area, consumptively, that's their interbasin transfer for that town right there, 5 MGD, because they send the other 5 back to the source basin. So this is very important, thinking of it as a net and not the. Talk with my hands a lot. I had to get everything. So I mentioned a lot about river basins. Let's look at the river basin map. This river basin map doesn't exactly match what the USGS hydrologic unit code river basin map, but it's pretty close. This one was ratified in statute in 93, along with the other statute, the primary statute that gives us the threshold which we follow. Okay. And 3-1. So this one right here. That's the Catawba River Basin. That's where the withdrawal for Charlotte water occurs. There are two intakes at Lake Norman and Mountain Island Lake. And then the discharge occurs here at 18-4, the Rocky River Basin, which is part of the larger Yadkin River Basin. Few key points of water transfers across the state. I mentioned that a lot of systems are built upon ridge lines, and so they run into that issue with the receiving basin and a source basin. So we've estimated over 130 water systems across the state are in that sort of situation where there's some kind of transfer. The vast majority actually under 100,000 gallons a day. But here we've calculated 80% are under 1 million gallons a day. As I mentioned before, there have been nine IBT certificates have been issued since the statute was ratified in '93. And there's been one previous certificate modification. So if I haven't mentioned it before, Charlotte Water has requested to the Environmental Management Commission a modification to their existing certificate. Their existing certificate is 33 million gallons a day, and they're asking for a modification of that. The one previous to this one was for Cary, the towns of Cary and Apex. There is a pre-existing allowance. There's approximately 24 water systems across the state that have a pre-existing or grandfathered allowance. That was part of the statute in 1993 that allowed the existing infrastructure to not have to get a certificate. And there are a handful of water systems that transfer sort of between that 1 to 2 MGD. And our group, the Water Supply Planning Branch, we use the local water supply plans to help to estimate approximately how much they're transferring so that we have an idea and make sure that everything's in compliance with IBT laws. Let's quickly go through the 9 certificates in North Carolina. The first one was Piedmont Triad. That's Lake Randleman. What that certificate was from. Number 2 was Charlotte Water in 2002. So these projects work on a 30-year time scale. So applicants have to project what their transfer will likely be out 30 years, which Charlotte's in the process of developing. And we are, by the time this gets through the process, we'll probably be close to that 30-year mark. So this is somewhat expected from DEQ's point of view that Charlotte will be coming to us asking for a modification. And then the third one was also in the Catawba, the Concord-Kannapolis transfer. And then moving down, number 8, we may have heard about Union County. That was about 10 years ago or so when the Union County IBT went through the process, withdrawing water out of Tillery to their service area that's in the Rocky River Basin. And then the last one was Pender County coastal transfer. So let's quickly talk short process. I'm going to describe what the modification process is subsection B. And I want to make it real clear here. This is the very first step. There are 3 major steps in getting an IBT certificate, and we are at the very beginning of the first step to hold public meetings for the public for their input, particularly their input on the environmental document that will have to be produced in the second step. Now, the second step by statute compels the applicant to do an environmental assessment document. Charlotte Water is going to do an much more rigorous, I should say, environmental impact statement document. Really goes through each one of the alternatives to evaluate how well they work with this project. There will be a public hearing associated with that EIS process when the document goes out for public review. And then the third step will be the EMC's final decision on the proposed modification certificate. Before I jump off of this, on number one, I didn't note any required public meetings on this. That's because by the statute, subsection B, it is not required. However, there is an existing settlement agreement that came about in 2010 that compels any transfers in the Catawba Basin to have public meetings, such as what we're here tonight for, as well as doing an environmental impact statement. All right, so let's talk about some of the EMC decision consideration. The EMC is the decision-making body on this project. DEQ works to help facilitate the process, and we work as staff for the Environmental Management Commission, but it is very much their decision to make. And following the statute, they have a lot of flexibility. So they can approve the certificate in whole or in part, flat out deny it, and can offer any mitigation or minimization measures that that they see fit from detrimental impacts. And to make this decision, the EMC is to specifically consider, and this is really where I press the point in public meetings, as well as when I give the same presentation to the Environmental Management Commission. This is what the statute reads that is to be considered. So any comments are very helpful if they are framed in one of these 9 findings of fact. Okay, so the first one is the necessity and reasonableness of the transfer. That really gets to the purpose and need of the project. And so chapter 1 of the environmental impact statement will be a purpose and need statement. We'll go through the demand projections as well as the transfer projections. Number 2 is looking at the direct impacts on the source basin. So in this case, it will be the Catawba River Basin. 3 looks at the indirect and cumulative impacts to the source basin. 4 are the indirect and cumulative as well as the direct impacts to the receiving basin. And Albemarle is in the receiving basin, in the Rocky River Basin. Number 5, the availability of alternatives. So in the environmental impact statement, there will be well, section 3 usually is the alternative analysis section where the document goes through each one of the alternatives to this transfer, as well as the preferred alternative to determine what impacts each of these may have. 6, the use of impounded storage capacity. So that would be applicable here since the withdrawals will come out of Lake Norman and Mount Mount. 7, that's impounded storage in Corps of Engineers reservoirs, which is not applicable here. 8, how does the service area sit on the landscape? So is it more like the 2 examples I gave earlier where you had the first example where the town is built on the ridge line, and the second example where the town was completely in the receiving basin. It is important for the EMC to take this into consideration. And Charlotte very much in Mecklenburg County, their service area is built on the ridge line between the two river basins. And finally, with number 9, because the EMC is allow so much flexibility within the statute, they can consider any other facts and circumstances necessary. So one more. In the statute, there are existing conditions that must follow with all the IBT certificates. So let's talk about the three right off the top. You have your water conservation plan, which is very important. The statute compels the water system to meet or exceed the water conservation measures and initiatives of any other water system within the basin. You have a drought management plan, which is also critically important. And because Charlotte Water is a member of the Catawba Water Drought Management Group, that they will be, I imagine, will be pulling largely from that drought management plan, which really works exceptionally well. You have a third one, the compliance and monitoring plan. Then you have quarterly monitoring reports. Key condition is the ability for the EMC to reopen and amend and modify the certificate at any point in the process. So if something changes within the receiving basin significantly, or if something is brought up that may have been errant within the environmental document, the EMC has that ability to reopen. No selling of transferred water to folks who are not in this initial phase, this initial part, the certificate. So they have to be a co-applicant on the certificate to purchase any of this transferred water. The legislature was, when they issued this, was very concerned that it could create a situation where a system could request a transfer certificate and then sell that water. So they sell that water to folks who are not co-applicants on this. They're very sensitive to that. The legislature was very sensitive to that and made sure that all the planning is done up front. And as I mentioned before, the EMC can impose additional conditions as they see necessary through this process. Thank everybody for your attention on the legislative and statutory part of the presentation. Ron's gonna speak on Charlotte Water's request.
Thank you, Harold. So, again, my name's Ron Hargrove. I'm one of the deputy directors at Charlotte Water, and plan to share a little bit about Charlotte Water. Cover again, similar to Harold, what's an IBT. Describe why we think an IBT modification is needed now. What is the modification process schedule? What alternatives are being considered, at least to get us to this point? And then I'll turn it back over to Angela to cover over how you can comment, participate in the rest of the process. And then we'll take questions from the public afterwards. So a little bit about Charlotte Water. We obviously serve all of Mecklenburg County, as well as have connections, interlocal agreements with all the surrounding county, including two in South Carolina. We have customers both in the Catawba and the Rocky River Basin. The Rocky River Basin, you can see, is in dark blue, the green on the eastern side of Mecklenburg County. We are the largest public water and wastewater utility in North or South Carolina. We serve a population of a little over 1.1 million. We have about 320,000 connections. And all of those also serve all the small towns, as well as the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. In Charlotte, we like to employ what we call proactive planning. We're a very master plan oriented utility. We want to look out 20, 30 years, sometimes even greater, about what's coming and what we need to plan for from an infrastructure standpoint. And so an IBT kind of dovetails into this very well. The statutes require you to look out on the 30-year horizon. So our 2002 IBT certification that we received for 33 NGD, it's on a peak day basis, but that projected out 30 years before we would might need an additional request. And so we're now looking out over the next 30 years. And we're doing that before that limit's exceeded, so that we're not in trouble from any statutory standpoint, but we want to be proactive and make sure our community has what it needs to continue to grow, just like every other community. We've been a long-term partner with the Catawba Water Management Group, as well as other stakeholder groups, especially one like the Yadkin PD Water Management Group that's in this area of the state. And one thing is being a partner with the Catawba Water Management Group that I'll point out is the management group is kind of that regional planning organization for water usage in the Catawba Watery, whether it be human or needs for power or just water resources, as well as trying to look out for the water use and needs from an ecological standpoint, as well as environmental standpoint. So we've been a long-term partner with them ever since it was founded back in 2007. And so as that partnership has grown, the management group has had the charge of keeping the model of the river basin, updated. They're currently in the midst of doing that now. And so one reason we, elected to start this process now was we've been waiting on the management group to get far enough along in the modeling effort as far as an update in order to start our process. We want to have one model. We want that to be the type of water read model for the basin, and that we use that to gauge, the impacts of our requests. As Harold said, we are a member of the Drought Monitoring Advisory Group for the Catawba Water Read. It has triggers that kind of look at reservoir elevation, drought conditions, groundwater network in order to establish what stage of drought you're in. And those stages go into calls for conservation. So we abide by that. Every member of the Water Management Group has to comply with the load and flow protocol. So what is an interbasin transfer? Not to say everything Harold said before, but specifically to Charlotte, the Catawba River. Let me see my cursor. So the Catawba River is on the left side of the screen, and that's where we get all of our source water. We withdraw about 117 million gallons a day to serve our community. Some of that water is consumed in the Catawba Basin, about 22 million. These are all estimates. And then through 4 of our 5 wastewater treatment plants, the discharges come back to streams that flow back into the Catawba Basin. The remainder of that is consumed or is discharged across the ridge line into the Rocky River Basin. And so that's the piece that we're talking about with this IBT. We're not talking about increased withdrawal amounts from the Catawba. We have plenty of withdrawal capacity, far greater than the numbers that we're talking about. We're only talking about what water goes across that ridge line that does not make it back to the Catawba Basin. How does it do that? I think there's plenty of thoughts about how an interbasin transfer occurs. Folks that are in the utility business obviously understand this pretty well, but just to paint the picture, so we draw out of the Catawba for our source water. We pump it out of one of the reservoirs to a water treatment plant who treats it for drinking water, potable uses. We pump that water out to the distribution system to our consumers, our customers. They use the water to meet all their needs, and it's some of that water is consumed, but the remainder is usually discharged. It comes back through our collection system to a wastewater treatment facility where it's discharged. And 4 out of the 5 times that occurs on a daily basis goes back to the Catawba. One of those situations is in the Rocky River Basin, and it goes into the discharge of the Rocky River. Thus, it's a transfer. To paint the picture a little bit more on the county map here for Mecklenburg County, the 2 blue dots are where we have intakes, one in Lake Norman and one in Mountain Lake. They both serve all of the water for our community. The water flows either pumped or flows by gravity to the blue squares, which are water treatment facilities. The blue arrows is where the water crosses the ridge line into the Rocky River Basin. And then the orange arrows is where it's discharged, either through our Mallard Creek wastewater treatment plant, right at the very eastern part of the county, as well as we have connections with the facility in Cabarrus County that are supportive of our wastewater by contract. The remaining plants that you see are in the Catawba Basin. All those flow back into the Catawba downstream. So why do we need one modification now? You can see here is our current trending, and our certification is based on 33 million gallons per day on a peak day. So the single highest day of demand where the water was transferred is how we're measured under our current certificate. So on the graph here, you see the red dashed line is our current IBC certificate of 33 million gallons a day. The blue line is our peak days, all the way back to 2005. So you can see the trending that's occurring. And we suspect that we will be at or near that 33 million gallon peak day basis somewhere around 2030. And so if we look out on the horizon, 30 years down, away from now, we expect to be somewhere between 50 and 60 million gallons, just on a straight trend, is what we think we're estimating. That will be refined as we go through the process. I know there are numbers put out about how much we're requesting. We officially haven't made a request yet, but that's where the trending is leading us to believe we will be. The gray line shows you what our average day is, and so when we get the new modification, will be based on the max month, the most water we transfer during a monthly basis. So you can see where that trend line. They both, unfortunately, are resulting in exceedances of our current certification somewhere around that 2030 range. So the modification schedule and process, we are at step 2 of at least a dozen, maybe 15 steps, big steps along the way. We're not even in the first inning. We're at public comment period. All we've done is make notice to DEQ and the EMC that we intend to go down this process. So we're taking the public's comments. This is the 3rd meeting that we've held, and we're taking comments through August 30th of this year. We plan to hold an extended stakeholder engagement process to see input from interested stakeholders to help us develop our EIS. We're going to include our South Carolina agencies and stakeholders along with the folks in North Carolina. We plan to incorporate and address the public meeting comments along the way. And then we'll gather all that information and start looking at alternatives to an IBT. All the things that we need to consider that would mitigate the amount of requests or eliminate it, if that's possible. We'll do IBT studies, look at demand conservation, drought monitoring, and then we'll submit that information to DEQ. And that's when it'll get into the state's hand from a public process standpoint. DEQ will develop an impact statement. EMC will take it up. We want them to determine through a public hearing the adequacy of our request. And then once that's completed, if it's determined adequate as far as an EIS, we will submit our official modification. That's when we'll actually pick the number of what the transfer request will be, if it's still needed for the next 30 years. The MC will then issue a draft determination based upon their findings and review of the information, and then there will be another public hearing to take public comments on their determination. And depending on the results of that, the MC will then issue their final determination about our requests. So we expect this to take a few years. This beyond fall of 2024 that you see on the time frame here is really just a straw man. We know gathering all the comments through the stakeholder engagement workshops as well as the public comments is going to take some time to develop, to look at alternatives, to do all the study work before we can submit it to DEQ. And then it goes into the state processes from there. And, that schedule is yet to be determined. But this kind of gives you an outline of probably how the fastest it could occur, if that's really realistic. IBT notification map, just wanted to give you an idea of who was noticed. We have to notice, again, as Harold said, since this is a modification request, we did not have a really official public meeting requirement, but we voluntarily chose to do public meetings. We're going to hold 6 of them, as well as complete an EIS for modification requests. So we noticed everybody in the source basin as well as the receiving basin, just like this will be a new certificate request. So every county in blue got a notice of our request, as well as, the top is in the red, colored basin, as well as the Yakin PD and the darker color, basin. We noticed folks, like, local government, entities, as well as public water systems, IBT certification holders. There's the North Carolina, South Carolina settlement agreement had a notification list. We noticed all those folks about this request, as well as other identified stakeholders, NGOs, nonprofits, tribal governments like the Catawba Nation. We noticed, also industries, folks like the Catawba Water Management Group, the Acton Water Management Group, as well as many others. I think we sent 38 publications in newspapers across the basins, as well as over 340 or so letters and emails about our request. So what alternatives have we considered today to kind of tell us which path we need to go down? We looked at some major things like how do we pump wastewater back to the Catawba from, the eastern portions of the county. We looked at water reuse options. Water reuse is where we take wastewater effluent, we treat it to a higher standard so that it could be used for non-potable uses. We have the Mallard plant. Fortunately, it has a reuse system where it provides that treatment. And we provide that treatment to, we provide that reused water to a golf course for irrigation, as well as UNCC for their cooling and irrigation needs. We looked at, could we develop a new water source in the Yakin Basin, much like Union County recently did? As well as should we increase and make a request for increasing our IBT through a modification? The alternatives we have to consider are things like capital costs, schedule, operation and maintenance costs, benefits and risk, environmental factors, and construction feasibility. And what we're looking for from the public and from our key stakeholders are what actionable alternatives we need to consider through the EIS process. So we hope to have a very robust stakeholder process to get to those alternatives that truly could be actionable to help mitigate this request. We are looking to further refine all of these details during the EIS development. So I'll turn it back to Angela to close this out and tell you how you can comment.
Okay, thank you, Ron and Harold. So how can the public comment and participate in this process? Number one is attend public meetings, which you all are doing this evening. Also, charlottewateribt.org. That is a website that we stood up as a part of this process. All documents, all recordings, all questions and comments that are part of the public meeting process will be posted, in any updates that we get or that we have will be on charlottewateribt.org. The public, anyone, can also email a comment or question to ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. And so we have folks in our organization monitoring that email address, and we will receive those comments and questions in. And then again, those will go on charlottewateribt.org. So there are a couple opportunities there for folks to electronically give us feedback on our request. Also, the public can comment on the draft EIS during the public hearing for determination of adequacy by the Environmental Management Commission, called EMC. So you can also provide a comment on the draft EIS to the EMC. You can also comment during the Environmental Management Commission hearing. It's the EMC hearing on the draft IBT determination. So there are several ways where the public can comment in person or give us comments electronically. And of course, if you attend one of our public meetings, you can also do that in person. All right, so this is meeting number 3. In Albemarle, we have 2 meetings in South Carolina that we are now confirming the dates. Most likely those will be in June, the end of June, and then we will have an additional, what we're calling Hickory Morganton Metro Area meeting, and that one will be in July, and we're moving up the date and location there. Oh, I did mention that for all of our meetings, there's an electronic way, so you can participate by Microsoft Teams virtually with all of the remaining meetings that we have coming up. Okay, so now is the fun part. And so for any of our attendees that we have here, do we have any questions or comments? And we may not be able to answer all of the questions that we get, but just know that all questions that we do and comments are logged and also recorded and will be on our website for further evaluation. So I will now pause. We do have Jay Brown and Caldwell standing to the side, and if we have any questions or comments, we will gladly take those now. So am I assuming that we don't have any? Okay, so that tells me that we have been super clear on what we have presented today. Again, we thank you for the opportunity to come to the city of Albemarle and the Albemarle area to hold this public notification meeting. And we are asking everyone to please check out Charlotte Water, IBT.org for further information, and you can track our progress as we go through this multi-year project. So thank you all for coming, and meeting is adjourned.